19. I will start with the roll call. The clerk gives me a list that says all members are present except Mayor Crombie, Councillor Demerla, who's away on a personal matter, Mayor Fortini. Sorry, I apologize.
Hey, don't make the mayor yet.
Sorry about that. See, Patrick, you leave the room. You leave the room for a minute. With apologies to Mayor Brown and acknowledging that Councillor Fortini is in fact here. With that, all other members are present. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes, March 28th, 2019. Councillor Parrish, you're on my list. Is it with regards to the minutes? Oh, okay. The minutes are okay then. If I could have a motion, deal with them at this time. All those, it's been moved by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? That is carried. Approval of the agenda, Councillor Parrish.
Yes, I'd like to withdraw motion 20.1, which is to do with police funding for a new festival, which I've been told we can't do this year. And secondly, I am moving a motion at 19.1. I'm bringing it based on an exception to the rules that allow motions from a local municipality on an urgent basis.
And at the appropriate time, you'll write out that motion for us?
We've got it.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the amended agenda? Moved by Councillor Parrish, again seconded by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? That is carried. Brings us down to public announcements sponsored by a member of council. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, I would like to acknowledge that both Mayor Brown and I, and along with Councillor Innes, who is chair of TRCA, that we had Minister Champagne come and award us $22 million on the flood mitigation plan that really will enhance and improve our infrastructure for the region of Peel. So I want to do a shout out and a thank you.
And well done. Seeing no other announcement at this time, I go to the consent agenda. Of course, we have a presentation of 7.1 and 8.1, items related to public works. Item 9.1. Do I have consent, or is it to be held? Hold it, please. To be held. Item 11.1. I have consent. Item 11.2. Consent. Communications, none related to human services. 15, planning. We go to 15.1. I have consent. We then go to 17.1, the final levy bylaw. Consent. 17.2. I believe we'll be speaking to that. Yep, that's been held. 17.3. Consent. I believe 17.4, Madam Clerk, will be dealing with under the staff presentation 8.1, correct? So that'll be held accordingly. 17.5, United Way campaign. And I know we'll have a presentation on that as well as part of 7.1. So we'll hold that and deal with it at that time. 17.6, annual transparency and accountability report. Consent. 17.7. Consent. 17.8. Consent. The communications items, 18.1, 18.2, all on consent. Trust will be holding item 19.1 and 19.2, and I see some nods, so that is on consent to be held. 20.1 has been dealt with, and that will take us to the bylaws and the in-camera. As always, I always ask, just to get a heads up, does anybody know for certain that they do want to go in camera on items 22.1 and 22.2? Would I have consent on 22.1? It seems I do. Then 22.2, is there consent? Seeing that, staff doesn't have to wait around, and we've dealt with the in-camera. Okay, very good. Now I need a motion, Madam Mayor, to deal with the consent. I keep saying that, Madam Clerk. I need consent for the agenda as amended accordingly, and you have to give me your recorded votes in this regard, so I would ask that you vote at this time. It has been moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Mayor Brown, to approve the consent agenda. If you could vote at this time electronically. And that carries. Thank you very much. Moving on then, we're on to delegations. Item 7.1, Daniele Zanotti, President and Chief Executive Officer of the United Way of Greater Toronto, to acknowledge employee contributions to the UWGT in 2018 by Region of Peel and Region of Peel police employees, and we're dealing with 17.5 at this time. Danielle, welcome. Just as we're getting started, perhaps I'd like to give you a more formal introduction. We had a marvelous meeting this morning with Daniele, and I commend him for all the work that he's done. I'm introducing the item with regards to a check presentation, and this relates to Report 7.1. Employees from the Region of Peel and Peel Region run the annual campaigns in support of the United Way, and in 2018, the United Way Greater Toronto funded 53 nonprofit agencies in Peel to provide over 88 programs and services to individuals and families in crisis. We're welcoming from the United Way Greater Toronto CEO and President Daniele Zanotti and Associate Manager Corporate Donor Relations Rad Shenendra. Peel United Way and the Peel Regional Police partners extensively with the United Way Toronto to support the Peel community and to focus on the root causes of poverty in Brampton, Caledon, and Mississauga. And I'd like to turn it over to our acting CAO, Jeanette Smith, to make a few more comments about the 2018 campaign. Jeanette?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. On behalf of the entire leadership team of the Region of Peel, I want to just say that I'm very proud of our employees at the region who for more than 40 years have raised funds for the United Way. In the past 10 years, $3.4 million has been raised in the Region of Peel employee campaign. In addition, many of the Region of Peel and Peel Regional Police employees spend their own personal time volunteering and offering financial support privately within their home communities. These socially conscious commitments are acknowledged for the benefits they add to the well-being of the community at large. I'd like to acknowledge the leadership of the 2018 campaign chairs, the Peel Regional Police Campaign Chair, Superintendent Donald Cousineau, and Co-Chair Superintendent Robert Shearer, the region's campaign co-chairs, Judy LaBelle and Olivier Purical, and the region's leadership donor co-chairs, Sandy Viana Tavares and Amy Youssef. I wonder if they could please stand and be recognized.
Well done, staff. Well done.
And just to wrap up, really the success of the campaigns are attributed to the commitment of employees from across the organization, the enthusiasm of those leads you just recognized, and the champions who work with them in the various sites and programs across the region. In 2018, the combined funds raised by the Region of Peel employees and the Peel Regional Police resulted in a total contribution to the United Way Greater Toronto, including Peel, of $387,517. Thank you to our employees for that tremendous act of caring, and congratulations to the regional staff for being recognized by the United Way as gold level leaders. With this, I'll pass it over to our speaker.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Chair Yanika, members of Regional Council, staff, and guests. The first person I met on the 12th floor of the Mississauga Civic Center was Mo, graduating from the first cohort of the United Way IT network program. Born in Mimico to a single mom, in and out of social housing, moved to Malton at 15, in and out of local high school and social assistance, Mo falls into the arms of community. A mental health program, Knights Table, food security program, employment support, anything to help him, mom, and his brothers make ends meet. He finds a flyer at a Mississauga Civic Center to join an IT workforce program. He starts post-secondary education and an internship at an IT company. And he graduates in a far too big suit to cheers from a bunch of friends. Poverty, the struggle to make basic needs, access to a helping hand close to home, these issues know no boundaries, no us or them. But you know that. And year after year, you have shown Region of Peel and Peel Regional Police that you care. This year, thanks to your employees, a record $387,000, 518 investment in community for this invisible network of agencies for individuals, families, and neighborhoods across Brampton, Caledon, and Mississauga. Let me join Janet in a special thanks to Catherine Lockyer for your executive sponsorship, Judy LaBelle and Olivier Parucal, chairs of the 2018 Employee Campaign, Amy Youssef, Sandy Viana Taveras, who co-chaired Leadership Giving, all the committee members, to the team at Peel Regional Police, retired Chief Evans and her executive team, including Superintendent Cousineau and Constable Ryan Chan, who can't be here today, for chairing the campaign, to all the union brothers and sisters who contributed, from OPSU 227, OPSU 280, ONA, UFCW, CUPE 966, and the Peel Regional Police Association, and to each and every one of you here at Regional Council. Because you know that our United Way social infrastructure is inextricably linked to the regional and municipal infrastructure, and there can be no boundaries. That is why when we began discussions well over a year ago with so many of you and others across the region to speak of then United Way Peel region merging with United Way Toronto and York region, so many of you championed the integration if you said we could raise more, invest more, and help more people locally. And each of you said it uniquely, but each of you all agreed, scale only if you can remain fiercely local. 1 year after our merger, we are indeed United Way Greater Toronto, working with communities in Peel, Toronto, and York region, better positioned to fight local poverty. In our first joint campaign as United Way Greater Toronto, led by over 60 volunteers, including your own CAO, David Schwartz, and other leaders, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Peel Region, GE, General Mills, PepsiCo, and Suncor, together, we raised a record $110.3 million, thanks to you, the largest United Way in the world. And for the first time in decades, we have welcomed new workplace campaigns from Peel, including Microsoft, strengthening existing partnerships, and but weeks away from an investment in food security, right here from a Peel company for Peel residents. Tuesday morning, we announced a record $94 million investment in 250 agencies across Peel, Toronto, and York region. Still, next to government, the largest funder of social services. And in Peel alone, we are investing well over $7 million in 53 agencies, delivering 88 programs. $120,000 in 3 neighborhoods, Mississauga's Sheridan, Ardglen in Brampton, and Bolton in Caledon. We have seeded almost $50,000 in new employment social enterprise and expansion of an existing local social enterprise. We've invested an additional $350,000 in workforce development programs for youth facing multiple barriers, just like Mo. And we've invested $100,000 in the Peel Community Benefits Network, working together on a Made in Peel region community benefits framework for the Hurontario LRT, building on our partnership in Toronto, where today, as we speak, 200 young people are employed as apprentices on the Eglinton Crosstown. And while we strengthen all of our investments, we remain seated with you at key local tables. The Peel Poverty Reduction Strategy that we co-chair with your own Sonia Pace, the Peel Alliance to End Homelessness, and Peel Newcomers Strategy. And a few days ago, I was at the Peel District School Board, thanking them for our partnership on the Black Youth Student Success Initiative, now implemented in 9 schools across the region. All of this with one stubborn resolve, Regional Council, the same resolve that pushed us to merge, to raise more, invest more, and help more people in your neighborhoods. Last year, thanks to you, over 200,000 Peel residents received a helping hand. People just like Mo, born in Mimico, still Saga proud, and today working full-time in Richmond Hill. No boundaries to our deep social pressures. Not one agency or program, just this invisible United Way network of care. Thank you for being with us, for helping us leverage our scale to remain fiercely Peel local.
Daniele, thank you very much. I have speakers. Mayor Thompson.
Yes, Daniele, and I know when you first formed to make it the GTA, you gave us assurances. You can cut overhead and help more, especially in the small communities. You delivered on that, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Dan.
With the budget today, not knowing where it's going to land, I think there isn't a better time than where the United Way needs to be. And congratulations on Peel Region, on all the staff, and your volunteerism over and above of what's asked of you. You're doing this on your own time to help raise funds for the United Way. And saying to the police, I thank you for that. And I know we did that in Caledon, and I know I'm sure Mississauga and Brampton surpassed what they were set their goals for. And I think, as you say, is the largest funder in the world. That's impressive. But I guess where I'm coming from is we all pat ourselves on the back, job well done, but how much is still our shortfall that we're having to deliver on the services? I want to thank, first of all, United Way for doing the job that they need to be doing, and you're doing it extremely well. But we know there's still demands here that we can't fulfill, and we're closing that gap. And how much of that gap we still have yet to have to close when we drive these campaigns forward? We know we need to drive this harder.
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Mayor, for being present with us at so many of events across the region. Your presence is felt. We are not going to charity, fundraise, or social service our way out of these deep social issues. And so while it is important that we continue to raise more, especially in the 905, York, and Peel, where social infrastructure is not keeping pace with physical infrastructure, we also know we have to continue to partner at local tables like the Peel Newcomer Strategy and the Peel Poverty Reduction, because it is in policy and government relations that we also have to meet some of these needs. And so we'll continue to raise more, Mayor, but it is also on how we collaborate as a region to deliver on affordable housing.
Thank you for doing your job so well.
Thank you, Mayor Crombie.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning, Danielle. So nice to see you. I am running late this morning. I apologize. I just wanted to thank you, too. I was very skeptical when we merged United Way into the greater GTA body, and I was worried that we wouldn't raise the same amounts of money and the monies wouldn't stay in Mississauga as they should. But I'm glad that you are very aware of those concerns and are focused on raising even more for the people who need it. So I'm honored also to participate on the campaign as the honorary chair of the mayors in the GTA, so you can put me to work anytime. I'm willing to make calls for you.
Thank you for chairing that for us, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I too want to thank our staff, starting with our clerk and right down to Victoria in my office, who reminded me to bring a check-in this morning, and I was happy to do so, because you've done a marvelous job, and I echo the mayor's sentiments. There was a grave concern that if becoming one, we might dissipate Peel. In fact, you've enhanced it. So well done to you and yours, Daniele, and all of the staff I'm so proud of at Peel Region and on the police force as well. With that, I'd like to invite up to the center here to take the council chambers to take a photo. Representatives from the UWGT, as well as our 2018 Peel Regional Police and Region of Peel campaign chairs to take a photo. If you could come forward at this time. Oh, I'm sorry, they're reminding me we already took that photo outside. Yeah, we can still give them the check, I'm told, so maybe that's the ceremony that we'll conduct. Why don't you come forward and we'll do the check presentation then? Yeah, well done. We're waiting for our friends from Peel Regional to come up, and here we are. Very good. And with that, and again, thanking Daniele for his presentation, if I could have receipt of the delegation item 7.1, and we're dealing with 17.5 at the same time. It's been moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Vincenti. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously with thanks to all. That brings us down to staff presentations, item 8.1, and we'll also be dealing with 17.5 at this time. The 2018 Operating Financial Triennial Performance Report year-end, presented by Norm Lund. Norm, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Yinika. Good morning. I'm Norm Lum, Director of Business and Financial Planning, and I'm here to present the year-end financial results for 2018. There. So at the end of 2018, the region completed its operations with an overall surplus of $23 million. Variance of 1.6% compared to the net budget of $1.4 billion. This excludes $4.3 million in contingent reserve draws we had budgeted. So starting on the right side of the chart, for utility rate supported services, and that is the water and wastewater services, a positive variance of $14.7 million, or 3.8% relative to its net budget, was experienced. $11.7 million was from the water services, and $3 million from the wastewater service. Looking to the left side, tax-supported programs ended the year with a positive variance of $8.3 million, less than a 1% variance relative to its net budget of $1 billion. $2 million of that variance was attributable to external agencies, and $6.3 million was from regionally controlled programs. The overall positive variance on tax-supported services was driven by a number of factors. So starting with the left side of the chart, there was an increased cost for WSIB of $3.6 million to reflect the latest update from actuarial estimates. In waste management, there was decreased fiber revenue of $4.7 million, largely due to stricter regulations for recycled material in China. There was also higher than budgeted demand for shelter in the homelessness service. And this was largely due to increased use by refugee claimants, with significant portion related to Toronto refugees. There was also higher than budgeted demand for accessible transportation trips of 27,000 trips, which resulted in a year-end deficit of $1.1 million, recognizing that there was still a reserve draw that we chose not to take. So now looking over on the right side of the chart, Peel also experienced a number of positive variances. There were payments in lieu of taxes and supplemental revenue in the amount of $6.3 million. A significant factor driving the variance is the timing of when MPAC assesses the new residential and non-residential units. For the external agencies, the OPP had a year-end surplus of $2 million, driven by the annual funding formula settlement. The settlement represented the amount of work done by the OPP on provincial matters. There was also a positive variance driven by the cancellation of a waste diversion pilot, which was to look at alternative approaches to mixed waste processing. Staff also managed to apply additional childcare funding of $1.4 million to expenditures currently funded by regional tax dollars. The final highlight is a positive variance resulting from a slightly later than planned rollout of the butterfly model homes at Malton Village and Sheridan Villa. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the utility rate supported programs finished the year with a positive variance of $14.7 million, a variance just outside the target range of plus or minus 3%. There were two key drivers of the year-end position. There was a higher than budgeted water consumption due to the hot, dry summer. This resulted in additional revenue for both water and wastewater services. We also achieved energy savings of $2.2 million through participation in the Industrial Conservation Initiative. Oops. So now that I've gone over some specific service drivers, I want to provide a quick overview of other key operational related areas. So for the 2018 budget, labor costs represented about 27% of the $1.9 billion regionally controlled budget. At the end of 2018, 99.3% of the budgeted workforce-related costs were spent. This reflects the accuracy of Peel's budget model and is consistent with the accuracy over the past 3 years. Rate stabilization reserves, otherwise known as working fund reserves, are important tools in managing the budget and operating risks. They can be used to fund one-time pressures in the budget so that temporary costs aren't permanently included in the tax base, or to fund changes due to unforeseen circumstances, such as unanticipated reductions in revenue. In Peel, the target range for stabilization reserves is between 5 and 10% of total operating expenditures. As you can see from the chart, both the tax-supported and utility rate-supported rate stabilization reserves were within the target range, and this figure represents the totals before surplus recommendations for 2018. Now we'll shift focus on how Peel did with its capital work in 2018. At the beginning of 2018, the region-controlled services, tax and utility, had open capital projects with a gross budget value of $7.5 billion. Prior to 2018, $4.4 billion of work was already done on those projects, leaving a capital work in progress of $3.1 billion. So during 2018, an additional $0.7 billion of work was done, leaving a year-end balance of $2.4 billion. Another way to look at the capital work is through the number of projects. At the beginning of 2018, there were 1,266 capital projects for regionally controlled programs. While every project is managed and monitored on a regular basis, we put increased focus on the top 25 projects in terms of value, as they represent almost half of the total value of the open capital projects. Now, these capital projects can be both large and complex and typically take 3 to 5 years to complete. So as shown on the graphic, 54% of the projects were at a stage where they were less than 80% complete, and the other 46% were either more than 80% complete, under warranty, or in the closeout process. A significant component of the capital works in Peel relate to growth funded by development charge revenue. Looking at the left side of the chart, as of December 31st, Peel received a total of $255 million in DC revenues. This represented about 75% of the $340 million in planned revenue for 2018, as per the 2015 DC background study. So if we look a little deeper at the data on the chart on the right, residential DCs were behind target, and the non-industrial DCs were significantly behind target, achieving 50%. Additional detail is contained in the development charge update report today, which you had received an updated DC dashboard. And while the DC revenue was behind target, no additional debt was required for 2018. This was largely due to measures that were implemented to increase revenue and cash flow collection. So on average, we collected the DC revenue about 4 months earlier in the land development process, resulting in a deferral of $90 million in debt. Through the work and guidance of the Growth Management Committee, enhanced expenditure management has helped to defer the need for debt financing too. So the combination of these two strategies to advance revenues and manage expenditures resulted in reducing the overall debt risk through a deferral of $720 million in debt relative to the DC background study in 2015. So looking forward to the 2019 operating year and the upcoming 2020 budget, there may be significant impact as a result of today's provincial budget announcement. As Council will recall from the 2019 budget, $670 million, or over a quarter of the region's total operating expenditures, are funded by external grants and subsidies, as many of Peel's services are provincially mandated and have some form of cost-sharing agreement in place. The budget assumed the province would continue to fund inflation and increases to service demand. This amounted to $11.85 million, or the equivalent of a net tax levy impact of 1.1%. So any changes in the current funding formulas would have an impact. After staff have had a chance to assess the impact of the provincial budget announcement, a verbal report will be provided to Council on April 25th. The assessment will also inform the approach to the development of the 2020 budget target, which we will present to Council through a report in May. So to recap the presentation, Peel's overall budget variance was within the target range of plus or minus 3%. Staff have recommendations for the tax surplus, which I'll show you in the next slide. And 97% of the capital work progressed as planned. And I'd mentioned just earlier, DC revenues for non-residential sector were behind target. So as articulated in the report that you have, staff have two recommendations, one for tax-supported controlled services and one for utility rate. We recommend that $510,000 be allocated to support the Emerald Ash borer costs for the conservation authorities, as articulated in the 2019 budget, and that the remaining $5.8 million be used to reduce the amount of debt financing that was required for the Seniors Health and Wellness Village. This will reduce the annual operating cost by $365,000. For the utility rate surplus of $14.7 million, staff recommends that 1/3 of the surplus, or $9.8 million, be allocated to support the state of good repair of Peel's water and wastewater infrastructure, and that the remaining $4.9 million be allocated to the utility rate stabilization reserve to address the impact of weather events. These surplus recommendations are in line with Peel's long-term financial planning strategy, as they support financial flexibility, vulnerability, and sustainability. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Norman, and there are. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation, Norm. I just wanted to confirm that the $14.7 million for the utility rate will be reinvested back into the water and wastewater systems through the reserve funding, or the system itself.
Yeah, through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. My other question, as it relates to the Emerald Ash Borer program, I have been reading online recently that other programs in other municipalities like Toronto and York Region, there's been a partnership with the not-for-profit LEAF program, or LEAF organization, and they are looking, or they do a one-time rebate program for private tree replacement. So that's tree replacement on private property. And I'm just wondering, in the, given that you're suggesting we put this $0.5 million towards the Emerald Ash program for the conservation authorities, is there another opportunity to work with LEAF to do a private tree replacement program?
Through the chair, certainly we'd be happy to explore. I wasn't aware that there was a program like that. During the budget, we had proposed that we would fund these temporary costs for Emerald Ash Borer through our surplus. So we weren't going to set aside because the cost was supposed to be temporary.
Right. What I can do is, once I find that information, I will send it to you, and you can send it on to the appropriate staff, because I emailed York Region yesterday to get some additional information as well.
No, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Thompson.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not just the conservation authorities. There's a lot of big size woodlots that are a net benefit to the region for a lot of things, especially for climate change. And a lot of them are full of maple and ash, and the ash are dead. So there's a huge cost to the property owners, and they can only do so much. But if there's something to be considered going forward, I think there's something that we can figure out what we could do to assist some of those people that's in private hands on how to do that. But I do know the conservation does have a problem, because I know the Terracotta Conservation Area, I would say probably the forest floor there is about 60% ash, just because of the nature of the soils and the reason why the trees are there. But we've got this is a huge challenge going forward, and I know we only got a little bit of money, but it's just how we could assist the private taxpayers as well, especially the ones that have mass. It isn't like 2 or 3 trees. What we're talking about is several hundred to a woodlot, and how we can reestablish and how we can maybe partner with conservation as well. But we can consider that somehow too. And I know that this is not really your bailiwick, but yet it is. So I think it's just something that I can ask we've got 2 conservation chairs here as well, but if we all can go back and think and figure out how we can partner with the private landowners as well that have huge woodlots.
Certainly, we'd be happy to look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That ends my list of speakers, and the clerk tells me I need a formal motion of receipt. So I would assume, actually, I need a mover and a seconder, and I'm guessing that's Councillor Rass and Mayor Thompson, that the 2018 surplus management actions as outlined in the report of the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer titled 2018 Operating Financial Triennial Performance Report Year-End Unaudited be implemented. And I need a recorded vote if you'd vote at this time.
Job well done, guys.
And job well done, yes. And that is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Norman. That brings me down now to items related to Public Works. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one item on our agenda. It was held by Councillor Sinclair, and that's 19.1. It's a Clean Water Act requirements, and it's here for information. Councillor Sinclair?
Thank you. I had a couple of queries. There is, on page 9.17, there's reference to Lake Ontario Collaborative Group of Region Appeal, City of Toronto, Durham Region, to protect Lake Ontario, and then they go on to talk about establishing a sustained year-round real-time water quality and water circulation monitoring data and reporting. And I don't see any reference to the Lake Ontario Lake-wide Action and Management Plan under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And I notice under the recent Lake Ontario Lake-wide Action and Management Plan, they are talking about a program to understanding nearshore nutrient dynamics and collecting information needed to better understand nutrient cycling and so on, and developing computer models to examine the water quality. And I'm concerned here, without the reference, are we duplicating efforts that are already out there or underway?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Acting Commissioner Andrew Farr to respond. Thank you.
Sure. Through the chair, that's a really good question. It's not our intent to duplicate any efforts. What we're doing is very localized to the 3 municipalities and looking at how we can protect ourselves from spills. Without getting into too much detail, we're bringing a report to the next council in a lot more detail about this program. And now that you mentioned this, I'll make sure we cover that off in that report to explain the difference between the 2 programs.
Okay, then. Good. Look forward to that. I guess also on page 9.111, last bullet point talks about developing education materials and so on regarding imported fill. And Caledon is extremely vulnerable to the importation of excess construction fill out of the Greater Toronto Area. And as a metaphor for the volume of fill being generated by Big Urban in the GTA, it equals the volume of the Sky Dome every year that they have to get rid of. And we're very concerned about contaminated fill coming up and poisoning local water tables up in Caledon. And there's one new aggregate strip mine underway north of Alton And they haven't even shipped a piece of pea gravel yet. But they are bringing in masses of imported fill, digging trenches outside of the excavation limit, filling it with imported fill, and then building the berms out of exported fill. They still haven't started doing any mining. So on that issue, I hope it's a little bit more than education materials, because we're really vulnerable. And I think council as a whole here at the region should be very concerned with it, because if something goes wrong with our water tables up there, the region has to come up and subsidize it by putting in municipal water. So I'd like to be kept informed of that particular issue, and I hope council pays attention to it also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Would you like to move the report? Okay, and second by Mayor Thompson. Do I need a record of it? Nope, all in favor? That is carried, and that concludes this portion of the agenda, and back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. That brings us down to item 17, items related to enterprise programs. Chair Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 17.2, additional one-time federal gas tax funding 2019, was held by Councillor Parrish. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, thank you. I have one question, and then I have a motion to move that's contrary to what is recommended by staff. My question is, I thought the new gas tax money was supposed to go to new unfunded projects. Does funding alone qualify?
Stephen?
Through the chair, thank you. This project is qualified, and it was identified in the schedule that's provided to us through AMO on eligible projects. We're looking to apply it to the portion of the project that has no financing. So the anaerobic digestion project is about $114 million. Right now, $68 million is unfunded, so we're looking to apply it against that to reduce the tax-supported debt on that project.
See, I should have known that answer. You wouldn't do it otherwise.
That would save us about $2.5 million a year.
Yep, thank you. My motion is in your packages. Can we put it up on the screen, please? This is moved by myself, agreed to by our council, and Councillor Medeiros has agreed to second it. And do you want me to read it, or it's taken care of? Therefore be it resolved that the Region of Peel once again transfer 83% of the top-up federal gas tax to its lower-tier municipalities. The proportions based on the most recent Statistics Canada census data available.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parrish. Speaking to the motion, Mayor Thompson.
Actually, I wasn't speaking to the motion. I was going to speak to the report, but I'll wait till after the motion's done.
Councillor Innes.
So if I can then have the floor, according to the clerk.
Yes.
Going back to the report, I understand, and the math, how can we not support what's recommendation? But when it comes to the upper tier, it's the responsibility of the upper tier to work with the lower tier municipalities and have that discussion. And I feel this was ramroded ahead without the consultation of the lower tier municipalities. And at the end of the day, all of us have to go back to to all who we represent and the reasons why the roads are in such bad repair or infrastructure is in bad repair, where everybody's hoping maybe this gas tax can help. And it's going, I don't disagree, this benefits everybody, and this is a good program. But I would really appreciate, especially the sensitivity that we're going through here through governance, it would have been, all I'm going to say is lessons learned, but please work with the CFOs at the lower tier municipalities as well. Have that dialogue before you go forward with a report. That's all I'm asking for. Fairness, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Thompson. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Councillor Fonseca. I think that this is the dialogue. This is the opportunity and the time for us to have these conversations. I think that staff have a responsibility to do what they feel is in the best interest of the region of Peel. We sat around this table in the last term of council and made a commitment that we were going to try to achieve a 75% diversion target rate for waste, which was a very difficult and hard target, I think, for us to achieve. We did some great work in trying to find the solutions, and that primarily required the building of an anaerobic digester, which we all agreed to. I think that it's prudent financially to, while we all have our responsibilities back at our area municipalities and we all have our shortfalls and our demands. I know that I heard it loud and clear during the past election about roads, and I continue to advocate for that at our local level. I think that we also have a responsibility here when we have an opportunity to decrease our debt and the debt that we're carrying on a commitment that we've previously made. I think that that's a responsible thing to do, and it's a responsible thing to do across the region. So I think that this is the time to have the dialogue. I understand where all of the area municipalities are coming from. I agree. I know we all have shortfalls. But at the end of the day, we're creating a shortfall at the region by carrying this debt load on a commitment that we all around this table made. And that commitment was to reach the 75% diversion target. And we know that we have to have the AD facility to do so. And I think that this was wise for staff to bring it forward. I hope that we have some great discussion. I understand, again, where everybody's coming from. And I know we all have our shortfalls locally, but there's an opportunity to not create a shortfall here at the region. And that money can be used in the future for other incentives. So I'm going to support the staff recommendation because I think that it's wise. And I think that it's honoring the commitment that we all have made to reach that 75% diversion target and not bore the cost as much as possible on our taxpayers.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ennis. The clerk was on the board. You took your name off.
I was just on the board in connection with a technicality on the motion of Councillor Parrish. We would need a bylaw to do the actual transfer. So if we could add to the bottom of the bylaw, if this is all right with you, and further that the appropriate transfer bylaw in accordance with the resolution be brought forward to council at the next appropriate regional council meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I understand the need to achieve the 75% diversion target, but I also understand that our municipality relies heavily on this funding. We have a lot of projects, roads especially, that needs repair. It's in desperate need of repairs and that. So I cannot support the staff recommendation. I understand where they're coming from, but again, we as a local municipality, we rely heavily on this funding. So I am going to support the motion that's before us. I think that I agree with Mayor Thompson. I would have preferred that we had a discussion with all three municipalities before this report came forward, because I just think that the way this has been brought forward really was not a good way to bring this. This is not the time to have this debate and the discussion around the table. I think it should have happened prior to the report coming. Maybe we could have come up with some sort of a compromise somewhere, but I can't support the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Groves. Mayor Brown.
Thank you. I too support Councillor Parrish's motion. Frankly, the region, I think, is in a fair financial position and that has the ability to carry this cost. In terms of the anticipation, if the precedent is this went to the lower tier municipalities, I don't think we should change that route now. Frankly, in terms of the long-term planning, I know the lower tier municipalities had made the assumption that this would be the case. That's certainly the feedback that I got from the City of Brampton staff. Additionally, even if you looked at the talking points from Ottawa when they're celebrating the top-up of the federal gas tax, if you look at the numbers they used in terms of what was going to Mississauga and Brampton, they were working on the same assumption as well. And so I thank Councillor Parrish and Councillor Medeiros for putting this forward. I think it's a prudent motion.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Seeing no further speakers to the motion, the report. We have a motion before you by Councillor Parrish, seconded by Councillor Medeiros, and you can vote now. And the motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to 17.4, I believe we passed that with the presentation, correct? Yes, thank you. Looking to Catherine. And 17.5, we moved with the deputation. So with that, back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fonseca. That brings us down to other business, item 19.1. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, thank you very much. If you look through the material that the Mayor of Mississauga has sent to the region, and it's been included in your package under 19, when you get to 19.1, you see a motion that was passed at our council that suggests strongly that we have approved in principle separating from the region. I don't think it's a subject that we have to fight over, quite frankly, but I do think when speaking on behalf of the region, any of us should say we're divided. Half of the region feels we should not allow Mississauga to separate, and half feels strongly that we should. If you look at the vote that was taken, you'll see that it was unanimous at our council. Doesn't mean we don't love the region. It means that we feel it's time to become an independent city, and we feel very strongly about it. If you look at the motion that was in your package, it gives you a little bit of anger at the way it's being managed up here by the chair and some of the staff. But if we get past that, I think the message is, in the therefore be it resolved, the regional chair and staff cease all activities, studies, and public statements related to the current provincial government review. And secondly, the chair and staff seek specific direction from council in the matter of Peel's remaining a region comprised of 3 municipalities or any other configuration agreed to by council before any further comments, verbal or written, are made related to the subject of regional governance. I have a small film clip I want to show you, and before you see it, I don't want you to take it as an assault on the chair. I want you to listen to what is said on the film clip so that you understand how passionately members of Mississauga Council have in the past and continue to feel about being a separate city. Can we have the clip?
So you didn't ask anybody like me, well, is option A get rid of the region? Well, that's a lot of option A's in the room for me, but you didn't say, do you want to maintain the status quo? Do you want to change the representation or some other formula? You've just skipped right by was that aren't they working for us, which is the biggest elephant in the room, in my opinion, and the history tells us that. But I understand the parameters of what you were trying to do. The second part of that is the second biggest elephant in the room, and this is how I rationalize it, is, but the system's fundamentally flawed. It's entirely undemocratic. It isn't based on representation by population, and in its application, Madam Mayor, it's embarrassing that they need to be reminded up there, but in its application, boy, have we gotten the short end of the stick more than just once. I won't elaborate, I already did so at the Region of Peel. What they're really saying to us is, okay, we don't want to solve the elephants in the room. Can we have a third one? Can we make your flawed system more flawed? And I think if you look at it that way, my constituents say no, no, and no. And to me, that's pretty clear, and I think this speaks to it in a way. In fairness to the people asking the questions, you need a stark yes or no, and I get that. The conversation can't be dialectic, I get that. But at the end of the day, in many ways, you've reaffirmed what I've always thought, that we know regional governments never worked well for us. They've proven, Madam Mayor said, it's unfair to say without, the equalized assessment, what an example, where they bled us for $25 million, knew they were robbing us, and just said, we'll rob you more slowly. But knew it was outlandish. So many other, Madam Mayor, walking out when we were right as rain on issues and say, well, if we all walk out, not one of us is in the room, so we'll just abort the whole place. So now they have a veto. I've got Caledon with 55,000 people, 24,000 homes, that has a veto over my ward, with 88,000 people, 35,000 households, and for fun, I'm adding 12,000. Caledon won't add that in the next 30 years. So here's this perverse, ruined system, and what they're saying is, but we don't want to talk about why it's all wrong. Can we just add one more elephant? And the answer is no, no, and no. And this substantiates it to a degree. So, Madam Mayor, I don't know where we go from here, but you've always known my thoughts are pretty clear on it. Thank you.
I said to them that as you get older, the finer point is you look back on your life and you said to yourself, you know, I was trying to manage that all this while when I really should have fixed it. And I was trying to fix that all this while when I really should have managed it. That's the most prophetic point here that the mayor is really making, if I can say. We've been dicking around trying to manage this thing when it should be fixed. And fixing it is blowing up the region of Peel. We all know it. It's the elephant in the room. Go to your constituents and say, we're looking at a new model. Can you explain it? And I can be brief because Councillor Sato said it so well. Well, some of us do have 120,000 people, 40,000 households. Brampton thinks they're getting there, but they have these 4 floating councillors, so they're really at 70 or 80 if you really did the math, but they think they need more. Well, Nando, if they need more, where does that leave you folks? Well, we don't know, but you know, Caledon fits in my ward twice, and they have. From that point on, if we were then to have the discussion we've been having, they'd say, you folks are all nuts. How can you not see what the obvious fix is? And it's something we've all accepted as representation by population. And then, Councillor Parrish, to your point, and the mayor said it as well, were that not enough, then it leads to perverse public policy. You've heard me say before, things that in all the years that I've allowed a great deal of development.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, just a point of order.
Everyone's had a developer.
Just a point of order. I don't think this is, you know, I appreciate the impact that the video was supposed to have, has probably had it. I just think that to give us clips, all of us have had clips. We don't know the context. I don't know where it was. I don't know what the questions were. I don't know the debate. And I think the purpose has, I think the video has served its purpose. I think we could just go on to the debate if that's okay. I don't think the video should be playing more.
And that's fine with me. What I wanted to make sure everybody understood was that as Mississauga, we feel very passionately about this. It's been a long-term goal. It started in 2003 with Hazel McCallion, and it was supported by all the councillors in 2003 on a different council. It's supported again in principle. And why we say in principle is if the Premier agrees to allow Mississauga to become its own city, and the conditions at that time are onerous, then we will choose not to. But in principle, as long as it's financially viable and it's good for our constituents, we believe being a separate city is our right, and we want to do it absolutely. So I just would like this motion to pass, which says we don't talk about this anymore in public unless there is agreement around this circle. And I don't think you'll ever get agreement around this circle. I think we recognize that it's split pretty evenly. So let's just stop talking about it, and we allow Mississauga to do its thing. And there are no more $325,000 studies done at the region to try and back the other half of council. I hope I've made my point.
Councillor Parrish, thank you. And if I may take the liberty as chair, I would just like to speak to him. And Martin, thank you very much. But in fairness to Councillor Parrish, the record is the record, and I have to stand by that. I want to remind you what we were talking about at the time was the governance model when not fixing our flawed system, we were talking about adding seats to Caledon. And that's where I'm speaking to. It's kind of out of kilter now, but at the time we were discussing, what about even adding more seats to Caledon, a few more to Brampton, because you had the bigger problem. And that's me saying, boy, as bad as it is, are we going to go to a third option when we haven't dealt with the first one? The only other point that I would make, though, because I've been asked the question as well, is, well, in more recent days, what's changed? I'm glad Carolyn showed the clip of the equalized assessment, because when I was recently asked, because I was asked by the press, what's changed? Well, the equalized assessment was a bad one. Carolyn, the other one I brought up was the dump site. Oh my gosh, how we took it on the chin as the city of Mississauga. That was many years ago. And what I said in an interview that I gave a few months ago, that in the recent era, the region of Peel has served us well. But Councillor Parrish, you're absolutely correct. I made those statements. It was in regards to us not being 24. We were moving more to 30 because some people thought that was the solution, and I thought that was a bit much. But no problem. It's a matter of record. You have every right to show it. I have
And
every
through
right to
you,
act on it.
Mr. Chair, if the clips had continued, you would have seen outside of that particular discussion, there were 3 more positions that you took that were rather strong, and they were absolutely clearly opposed to the region and very much in favor of separation.
Yes. And I respect that. The last point, if I may, one more, and no getting around it. I tell you what, more than anything has changed my perspective over the 30 years that I've been at this. And I guess people have the right to change. And if you're fairness, it all started with Alan Thompson when it was 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking to the next chair for the CBC. And I reached out to Alan. I say, Alan, it's your turn. It belongs to... He says, Nando, I think you served us well. You're the standing member. We'd be honored if you were chair of the CBC. In the 4 years that I've had the privilege, and had the privilege of being chair of the CBC, boy, do you get a different perspective on the region of Peel and of Caledon. Because you spend a lot of time up there on things like Bell Fountain and the work that we did, on the moraine, on the escarpment, all of the things. And boy, did it give you an appreciation for the marvelous organization that we are, highlighted by the idea to build the Credit Valley Trail that connects all of us. So my position has evolved on the matter. Are there still problems and concerns, Councillor Parrish? Yes. Is it the best model we've got? I think so. But I accept the criticisms from others that see it differently, and I acknowledge that people say, Nando, your position has evolved on the matter, and the answer is yes, it has. And I respect, and Caroline, I expect the respectful way in which you've spoken to the broader issue as well. Councillor Parrish, anything further?
No, I was just going to rebut that, but I won't. There is a clip on there from 2018 when you were chair of the Credit Valley Conservation, but we'll let that go. I would just hope that our colleagues all agree that the back and forth is not doing anybody any good, and that we would prefer you're not taking a position any further, that you leave us to do our argument with the Queen's Park, and let it be.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to tell you I respect where Mississauga wants to go, and that's fine. What goes in Mississauga stays in Mississauga. We're here at the Region Appeal. Brampton has to do what it has to do. Caledon has to do what it has to do. It's the province that's asked us. And at the Region Appeal, we all took an oath to be here as regional councillors. And as far as I'm concerned, we elected Chair Nando Anika to be our CEO. He's doing his role as a CEO. And as far as I'm concerned, I respect that Mississauga wants to do what it needs to do. That's your position. Take it to the province. The region needs to take their position to the province. So does Brampton, and so does Caledon as well. So what I'm asking is, I really think, personally, when you read through this motion, I would like to ask the clerk, or maybe legal, the question I have is, therefore be resolved that the regional chair, who's our CEO that needs to do his job, if you look at our procedural bylaw, 6.1.8, this is illegal, and really, I question if this motion even is legal to be brought forward. And can I get some clarification on that, please?
Through the clerk?
We'll ask Michelle first.
Our acting senior solicitor, Michelle, on behalf of Patrick O'Connor, please.
Hi, my name is Michelle Wong. I'm here for Patrick today. There is one issue with the both resolutions, in that it speaks to the regional chair, and the regional chair really has 2 roles. There's the corporation and its staff, and then there's the regional chair, who is both head of council and CEO. And as CEO, he has a mandate by statute that can't be derogated from, and that mandate is in section 226.1 of the Municipal Act. It says the chief executive officer shall uphold and promote the purposes of the municipality, shall act as the representative of the municipality both within and outside the municipality, and shall promote the municipality locally, nationally, and internationally, and shall participate in and foster activities that enhance the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality and its residents. And so in that second role, which the CEO role, is specifically legislated by the Municipal Act and is not governed by council. And it makes it mandatory for the CEO to uphold those goals and those purposes. And so in terms of the resolution, the council has broad authority to direct the corporation and its staff and to do all sorts of things with respect to its authority under the Municipal Act and to enact bylaws. But it cannot derogate from the chair's duties as CEO. So in that sense, the chair should probably just be deleted from those two resolutions.
Yeah, I still have the floor. What I like to ask Mr. Chairman, I respect where Mississauga needs to go, and I think that's fine. I think here this just is redundant. To me, I think the motions should be pulled back. Let Mississauga take their position, and all of us take our positions, and let the province decide where they want to go with this.
Thank you, and if I can say as chair, with respect to all, when I read it, not because of the motion in and of itself, but I mentioned at our last council meeting, I spoke with legal and clerks 4 or 5 months ago on the file and was given that answer. When we were here 2 weeks ago, I asked it publicly. The clerk and Patrick O'Connor gave you the exact same answer. I am duty bound to do exactly what I'm doing. So when I read the resolution for the first time, I think it's what the lawyers refer to as ultra-virus. It's out of order. I can't not be compelled to perform my role because now I'm in a dereliction of my duties and the oath that I took. So I would be ruling that it was out of order, and I'd leave it to the rest of you to figure that out. But I welcome the conversation because I think we need to have the conversation. So, Madam Clerk, through to you, I'm being told, and I understand it to be an inappropriate motion. How do we move forward from here? What is your suggestion? Because I'd like the rest of the speakers to speak, but you have to be speaking to a bona fide motion before me. Madam Clerk.
The motion itself, as written, would be an inappropriate out-of-order motion for the reasons that Michelle has pointed out. There's also some difficulty with the wording of the motion in relation to the limits that are being suggested. For there to be no verbal or written, does that mean, for example, that the CAO could not communicate with staff? Also, in connection with the May 8th meeting that the ministry has requested be hosted here, would we not be able to work with the province? And this is a provincial process. And is it directing that we would not be able to respond to questions or anything directly from the ministry when it is their process? So there are some significant difficulties with the motion and in being able to actually fulfill the terms of the motion if it was to pass in relation to staff, let alone it's not an appropriate motion as it relates to the CEO or the chair.
So that being the case, I do not have a motion before me, and that concludes this component of the conversation. Would someone like to make an alternate motion we would like to speak to? I've got speakers on my list, but I guess I have to ask that that be cleared, and I will start fresh if someone wishes. If you want to just give me a show of hands, Mayor Brown.
I'm happy to put an alternate motion on the floor if that's the time to do so.
I require a motion for us to speak to anything right now because you've just learned I don't have a motion on the floor that's properly constituted. So I acknowledge you first, and I will go around the table. Patrick, Mayor Brown.
Well, what could provide a platform for this conversation is we put forward a motion asking the region to do an analysis of the financial contributions of each municipality and the cost of the dissolution of the region appeal. And we can talk about whether such a report would be something you'd like the region doing. And I would note that I know there's been some people who have questioned whether the Deloitte report was completely objective. I believe Deloitte is an organization that is obviously has an upstanding reputation. Having said that, if we want a more detailed report with exact numbers, I think that would be helpful. And then that way, I thought the Deloitte report would have ended that speculation over whose numbers are correct, but maybe we need to do this again to make sure we have one set of numbers, we can all be on the same page, and there's no more disagreement on what the actual financial ramifications are of this conversation. And so could that be an opportunity to have this conversation and equip you with the ability to do your job, Chair?
Thank you. For the purposes of the discussion, I need a seconder for the motion. I have something on the floor. I will acknowledge Councillor Vincente as the seconder. I go to my list to speak to that motion or any other. Councillor Parrish.
That motion concentrates on finances. That motion doesn't speak to the issue of civic pride and all the other reasons that Mississauga has for leaving the region. I also would like to bring up Schedule B, procurement approval authorities under Part 4, addressing Mayor Brown's motion directly. It gives us all the ways that you can direct purchase, informal request for quotation, request for quotation, request for tender, request for proposal, direct negotiation. None of it gives that power to the chair. You have a letter in here that said you instructed staff to hire Deloitte. You don't have that power. The only person who has that power is the chief financial officer as you look at this schedule. So having the discussion here first would have been the way to do it, because the only other way to direct a $325,000 contract with Deloitte would be by a resolution of council, which never took place because we didn't know what was going on. So I don't know. I don't like that motion at all. I think it's got nothing to do with what we're doing. It's a financial motion. It's already been done improperly. The report has already been released. There's nothing on here that gives the chair or the CAO or CEO, I'm sorry, the power to do what has already been done. So redoing that is quite a waste of time. I think another motion would be, and we'll have to be asked if it's a straight, proper motion, that we no longer put forth a regional position on Mississauga's separating from the region of Peel. We don't order any more financial studies. We leave the issue alone. You go ahead on the 8th with your meeting. You host the gentleman from the province. But there is to be no more position taken by the region of Peel on a political issue unless it's passed at this council today.
Councillor, sorry.
I'm done.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. With respect, and I think we went to some trouble to give all of you the response. I believe you're fundamentally incorrect. I most assuredly acted within my authority, but I'd like Michelle and the legal to speak to it again.
Yes, the chair has authority to direct the commissioning of the report pursuant to that same statutory authority as CEO. And the CAO and the CFO also have obligations under the Municipal Act to support the chair in this chair's statutorily imposed duties. The chair can direct the CAO and the CFO, but only up to their delegated limits. So the CFO, under the procurement bylaw, has the authority to award directly negotiated contracts up to a value of $250,000.
The amount we were told last week when we questioned it was $325,000. There's a second letter here talking about evaluating DCs at another $41,000. Does anybody know exactly what this whole fiasco has cost? I'm sure it's over $250,000.
Through the staff.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. The contracts that were tendered for this or put out for this work were $225,000 with Deloitte, our external auditors, to conduct a financial analysis. We also retained Watson and Associates, and this was in the correspondence provided to the city, for another $100,000. The work was just completed about a week and a half ago, so we don't have final invoicing in. The work was incredibly complex and holistic. So I think the value there is, I don't expect them to come in below the budget. There's not going to be any savings there. When we compare that to the arterial roads review that Deloitte did for us, that was $215,000. So it's in the same ballpark as that work.
But would that be considered contract splitting? To award one at 225 and another one at 100 for the same end results?
One was on the development charges.
Through the chair, the procurement bylaw does have a provision to not artificially reduce the value of procurement. The provision states where goods and services of the same kind or type are required in connection with one project, all of those goods and services shall be included in determining the price or value. Here, staff treated the Deloitte and Watson procurements as two separate ones, and that they interpreted it as not violating that provision. And in our opinion, in legal's opinion, that is a reasonable interpretation of that clause. There were two separate vendors, two separate areas of expertise, accounting, auditing for Deloitte versus Watson, which they're economists, and they provided a review of the development charges, revenues and impacts, and Deloitte in terms of a review for the financial statements and the different models. So as the bylaw speaks to artificially reducing the price of the same kind or type, these were managed separately as different types and different kinds. I also understand that this is the usual and regular practice of the purchasing department in how they treat these separate kinds of contracts from different vendors.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, while we have the lawyer giving opinions, does the CAO not derive his power to instruct our staff to do things like this because he is here at council and we give him that power?
The CEO certainly has powers through being appointed by council, and yes, the council can restrict what the CEO does. Subject to a specific restriction on that point, the council approves the purchasing bylaw and gives authority to staff to exercise that purchasing under that bylaw, which staff did do.
So in future, through you, Mr. Chair, if the CAO gets another bee in his bonnet and wants to do another study on something without council approval, we can now ask him every week if he has any contracts outstanding for hundreds of thousands of dollars on a subject of interest to him, not approved by council?
Well, I think if the motion, as it was originally drafted, that's now off the floor, had directed staff not to cease activities, then that would be a valid motion.
But you didn't answer my question. My question is, does the CAO derive his power through resolutions from this council if in future he decides he wants to study something to do with conservation, unbeknownst to this council, signs a contract for $225,000 this week for conservation issues, next week for something else? He's empowered to do that?
I can't speak to specific situations of each, but he can act within the confines of the powers that council has given him, largely through bylaws and the delegated authority bylaw.
Unfortunately, through you, Mr. Chairman, that sounds like legalese to me. What we're going to have to now do is once a week ask the CAO or the CEO what project he's got underway and how much it's costing.
Perhaps, Councillor Parrish yourself, but the CAO had a thought on that as well through the acting CAO, Jeanette.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to confirm, there is reporting to council on a triennial basis for all procurement. So council does get a report, albeit after it's done or in progress, but council does get a report triennially. It goes through all the tenders, RFPs, et cetera, and at that time they can certainly question the CAO or certainly any member of the executive leadership team on that procurement.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can I ask the CAO? Obviously, you've pointed out it's like closing the barn door after the many horses have escaped. Was this particular two sets of contracts, were they tendered?
Through the chair, no, they were directly negotiated because of the expertise with full authority under the purchasing bylaw.
But still, 24 members of this council had no idea almost $400,000 was being expended.
If I could add to that, just to put some context, I think, around it, and I appreciate this is an unusual situation in this provincial process, but regional staff do regularly procure external professional expertise. And they do it through all the rules of the purchasing bylaw, but we do it for a number of reasons. So sometimes we're doing research and getting professional expertise to inform our service delivery planning and design to support the commissioners to make decisions. An example would be bringing in professional expertise to review our asset management maturity model so we can adapt that program to provide, do better job with asset management. We sometimes undertake research with professional expertise to inform recommendations to council on service level changes or advocacy positions. So an example would be the Mowat Centre was a direct negotiation to come in, and they did the presentation to you about how the nature of employment is changing, what the implications are, and what we should be advocating. Sometimes there was one with the review of housing related grant programs to decide whether these programs are still effective or not. Should we continue them or not? There are times council does direct us to go out and get someone. The arterial roads review with Deloitte is an example. We were directly. And lastly, there's also examples where we undertake research on issues the province is working on. So in public health, they're looking at the whole smoke-free bylaw or the healthy eating programs, and public health staff are asked to sit at tables to give input on that policy, and sometimes they do outside research to influence that professional input to the province. Sometimes the province does consultation on legislation and they say we want a resolution of council, and we would bring that to council. We've had several around the Planning Act changes recently. So there's a broad range of types we do. In this particular case, the provincial review of regional government requested feedback from the heads of council, and so this objective financial analysis was to support the chair in providing that feedback to the provincial advisors.
Well, I
Sorry
would
for
just
the
like
long
to make,
answer.
I would like through you, Mr. Chairman, to make one final comment, and I'll be interested in hearing what everybody else has to say. My final comments are contract splitting, in essence, is what's taken place. It violates the spirit of our procurement policies. And as far as what the CEO has done, he knows clearly that one half of his council supports retaining the region. He knows clearly, we've made it more than clear, the other half of his council does not. The obligation was therefore on his shoulders to consult with both halves of this council, and he did not. That's my finals. I'll wait and hear what everybody else.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. I wanted to add in terms of that explanation a couple of points, and it's in the report that you've been given back. Remember, the second report that was done speaks to development charges. You all know we've been dealing on that file independent of governance because the province of Ontario said we're coming after you on the development charges. There's a letter from the minister today. Some of that work related to that and saying what's our best argument on development charges, and of course they would have a great deal to do if we split up the region of Peel. The second point I would make, and it certainly came up regularly at your meeting Monday night in Mississauga, the mayor said it many times, timing, we're in a hurry, we're in a hurry. We learned this in January. They wanted something from us on February 8th. So it's kind of hard to say, well, put it out to tender. Who can get back to us in 60 days with your bids? We were under the same imposition you were, and it was mentioned at great length at your meeting on Monday night as well. And thirdly, the point that I want to make, I'm pretty sure from my 30 years in Mississauga, your CAO has the exact same authority in Mississauga. The amount may be different, but I'm pretty sure it's been exercised many, many times, certainly over my 30 years, under the exact same circumstances. So I just think that needs to be added as well. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand where Mississauga is coming from, and I think that if Councillor Parrish's comment about the chair not consulting with the other half or the city of Mississauga or the members of the Mississauga Council, if that's the case, I think that should not have happened, because we do have 24 people around this table and we have all three municipalities. So if that's the case, and I don't know that that's the case, then really everybody should have been in the loop. So I agree with that, Councillor Parrish. I also think that, going back to the clips with the chair, at that time he was in a different role. You were a councillor in Mississauga, and so you spoke in defense of Mississauga. Here, you represent all 3 municipalities. You have to act in the best interest of this region. So I would not be happy if you were taking sides and acting as a Mississauga councillor or defending Brampton or whatever. I think you need to speak as a chairman and represent the 3 municipalities at the table. So I totally agree with what you've done, and I think that looking at it, you needed to work in the best interest of this region. I've been through 2 reviews now with governance, and every time it came up, it was always based on a financial analysis of the 3 municipalities. And I think that the motion that Mayor Brown has on the floor is appropriate if we're looking at cost, because I think that that's what the Deloitte report was all about, was about dollars. I think that that's what the city of Mississauga is talking about. It's dollars and how much they've contributed to the region and what it's cost Mississauga. So for that reason, I will support the motion that Mayor Brown has on the floor. I don't even know why we're getting into this. This is the province of Ontario that started this. We should just let them do their review, carry on, and just not get involved in that. I think we're just muddying the waters at this point, and I think that we should just wait and see what the province comes up with after their review is, I think it's in June, the review is concluded. But at this point, I'm not so sure why we're dealing with this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and I echo the same, I share the same opinions as Councillor Groves when it comes to the role of the chair and respecting that role, the fact that you do represent all 3 regions, regardless of what your position was before as a councillor in whatever context. The reality is you are the chair for this region. It is your job to act in and do so. I just have a question. So the motion that's on the floor, just for clarification, can we just review what that motion is again, please?
Yes, and I'm going to ask that it be written out and put on the screen so that we're clear, Chair, Mayor Brown, if we can, because I think it's important that we get the words right, so. I will carry on.
And just one more question in the meantime,
yes,
while we are, the motion that was tabled and passed at the last regional council meeting to make the information from the Deloitte report public. Who moved that motion? Was it Patrick?
Mayor Brown moved it. It was seconded by Councillor Medeiros.
Okay, great. So as we get the wording on the screen for this new motion, because Councillor Parrish has indicated and alluded to perhaps the Deloitte report being wrong, I think that Mayor Brown's new motion, once it's up on the screen, is appropriate to put forward to get further clarification, because as a region, if we're talking about a serious matter as to what to do with the future of the region, I think it's important to have all the financial information available and for all different lower tier municipalities. And I certainly disagree very much so about not being able to talk about it publicly. This is a public matter and a very serious one. So I look forward to seeing what the new motion says. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and just to Councillor Santos, with respect to speaking publicly, the chair has never been, we've never taken a position here So there isn't a position for him to take publicly, and I think that's what's at issue, is that we've never taken a position, we've never had a formal vote. So if half the council takes an opposing position to that of the chair, how can the chair take a formal position? There's an inherent conflict there. They're only here to promote the region. It's quite another thing to take a formal position on a political matter without first asking this council. As mayor, I've never would have been allowed to do that. Think about this, Mayor Brown. You could never have done this, nor could you have commissioned that report without the authority of your council. You could not have done it. I could not have gone to my CAO and said, let's go out and commission 2 studies worth $300,000. You have the delegated authority. I don't. I would have gotten raked over the coals. In no way could I have commissioned the report that you did to justify whatever you wanted, the financial numbers you wanted to justify. It's not in my legal authority. I derive my authority and my power from my council. They direct me how to act. We make a motion, we come to a conclusion, we come to a decision, and then we go to staff and direct staff to issue reports. I in no way could have taken the action that you do. So I don't understand how a person who's not elected, who's only elected by this group, can direct staff without authority of council to spend $325,000. It doesn't work at the city, and I don't understand how it could work here at the region. Obviously, that's something we'll have to take to policies and procedures and understand better, because it doesn't work at the city, and I'm an elected person by over 100,000 people, and I could not have commissioned a $325,000 report, and I don't understand why you could have, especially without having taken a position here at this council. It's a fundamental flaw. This isn't business as usual. It really cuts to the foundation of the region, and this is surely bigger to the acting CAO than normal staff practices. Now, this is happening to Mississauga today, so obviously we're upset, but if it can also happen to Brampton and to Caledon next time, you'll be equally upset. This isn't about the numbers, it's how this place functions. And now I have to say there is a fundamental lack of trust, that you can go behind our backs and commission a study without sharing it with us, without letting us know, and then releasing it to one member of this council. That is fundamentally unfair and inequitable, especially to me, to be operating in the blind when a secret report exists and you share it with the mayor of Brampton. It's wrong. It's immoral. So I did want to talk about the Deloitte, but I think what's happened with your Deloitte study is it's really muddled the waters. It's created a lot of confusion. We in Mississauga fundamentally disagree with many of the assumptions that are made in that report, such as there would be 2 police boards. That would never be the case. Such as we would merge parks and recs. We would never do that. The municipalities, and that's how you would derive your efficiencies. We would never do that. Cities always want the control for local programs and services such as parks and rec. So I don't agree that you had the delegated authority without the approval of this council to direct the spending on 2 reports of $325,000. I have to tell you, I apologize I wasn't here for that discussion. I know Councillor Vicente added it to the agenda. I was already committed to be the keynote speaker at an address in downtown Toronto, and they were counting on me being there. But I didn't realize the materiality of the discussion, or that we would unveil that there was a secret report, and a secret report that had been leaked to one member, the mayor of Brampton. I was gobsmacked, honestly, I have to tell you, and completely blindsided in the media, because the media was asking me for comments in a report I didn't know existed, that Mayor Brown was commenting on. And that's just unfair, Chair Unica. Fundamentally unfair, and quite frankly, I think that this whole thing is really immoral. There is an inherent conflict of interest in all of this. When Chair, you're speaking about self-interest, but you sit here at the pleasure of this council, and you have to remember that. No decision was taken at this council.
With all due respect to Mayor Crombie.
Please, your point of order.
My point of order is, I think we heard from legal what your role was. Yeah. So I respect the mayor's opinion, but that's an accusation that I don't think is correct when we've already heard it from legal. I just want to clarify.
Mayor Thompson, let's clarify this. Could you go to your CAO and order a $325,000 report without the order, without?
Yeah.
I am speaking to the motion.
Because
And
I
you
don't
know
have
you
a
couldn't.
procurement policy that says I can.
Because you know you couldn't, and I couldn't either, because it's immoral. Frankly, I am not interested in spending any more money on a report that's already confused and muddled the issue. The timelines are tight. It would be a huge undertaking, and enough money has been spent without approval.
Thank you. And please, we heard everybody else out, and the mayor has the right to speak, but I do want to speak and answer directly for the points that she's raised. Be very, very clear, and it's explained. I did not commission a report. It was the staff that came to me and said, Chair, we've been contacted by the Premier and his advisors that we have to give a position by February 8th. We would like to go do analysis. I approved that, but it wasn't I that asked them to go do it, because we're going to be sitting down with these folks. We have to put our best foot forward. Madam Mayor, with respect, you represent one municipality. I represent 4. And it's been made very, very clear what my role is. So to be absolutely clear, I did not commission either study. Staff suggested it's what we should do. I thought it was most appropriate. You can judge me accordingly. Let's be very clear as well. Madam Mayor, I heard you out. When I have the floor, you can come after that. Number 2, I did not share the report with Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown, through his staff, approached my staff and asked for whatever information we had. It is a matter of record that for 5 weeks after providing it to the 2 advisors, I shared it with no one and spoke to no one. But as I said 2 weeks ago in this forum, was I going to lie to a mayor? Madam Mayor, to you, there was a lot going on in the press and back and forth, and I think the Mayor of Brampton said it's my turn to respond. He was doing his homework. In fairness to Mayor Brown, the full story is, when I contacted him after the staff spoke with each other, I go, you've asked, I cannot lie to you. I provide it to you in confidence. In fairness to the mayor, he didn't share it with anyone until he came back here and said, it's a matter of record, Madam Mayor, he came back here and said, the situation has taken such a turn that I think it has to be made public. Madam Mayor, that was put to a vote around this table. The issue was opened up unanimously. Number 2, I said, are you sure you don't want to get it in camera? Unanimously, your councillors and everybody else said no. So number 3, you want it public? I made it public. Number 4, I heard through the streaming the meeting you had on Monday. I was delighted at all the people that made reference to the Deloitte report and data and information. And why would we try to avoid that? So I stand by that. Number 5, I don't know how many times you have to hear it. The staff has made it unequivocally clear legally I did what I am bound to do. And number 6, and it's the last thing I'm going to say, and I promised myself I wouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it because I think it needs to be said. We all have our opinions on how this is going to unfold. I have a very strong opinion on how I think it's going to unfold. There's one scenario that I don't think has a prayer of happening. If I'm proven right, what it means is you're all going to be back in here in one form or another working with each other. I was trying to avoid a civil war and us burning down the house we all have to come back into at some point. And I may be proven wrong, but if I'm right, you folks, I don't believe I'll be around the table. You folks in one form or another are going to have to work with one another. And throughout, that's what I wanted to preserve, and that's why I never spoke to the report after having it passed on to the provincial advisors as we were required to do.
Point of privilege.
Madam Mayor, the floor back to you.
Yes, we were referencing the Deloitte report only to correct the messaging and the misinformation. Secondly, you commissioned a secret report, didn't tell anyone, and then you provided it in confidence to one individual. You're splitting hairs, whether the staff did it. The staff had no right to provide a report to one individual, not everyone. In whose authority does staff provide a report to the mayor of Brampton without providing it to each and every one of us, including myself? How is that right? How is that moral? That there's information being floated around that is inaccurate and only one person in one side of the equation has access to it?
A point of clarification.
And when were you going to make the report public?
We did. Yeah.
Only when asked
Chair,
to at the last meeting.
Point
Mayor Brown, I have the floor. You're not
Madam
recognized.
Mayor, on a point of order, then I'll come back. What is your point of order, Mayor Brown?
If the mayor of Mississauga had asked you for the report, would you have provided it? Would your staff have provided it?
Of course.
So every member of council would have been treated the same.
Of course.
False. We had no idea there was a report. I'm not sure how you did.
Yeah.
We're talking about morality here, Councillor Innes, and how the practices here function, and how staff or how the chair or whoever did it can release a secret report to one individual and not everyone else, and not make it public.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to rule that is not on the floor. Do you have any other concluding comments?
I am not willing to spend any more money than we already have to create more misinformation.
Understood. Thank you. Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you. There's an aspect that I think should be emphasized here is the role of professional staff advising council. And there are certain officers that this corporation has, and their roles are carefully laid out in the Municipal Act. In addition to that, they operate under their own professional bodies and their codes of ethics, so accountants and planners and so on. And I wouldn't want to see motions passed here that would fetter their discretion, professional discretion, to advise us on important matters, any important matters, governance or otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. A few points here. First of all, I don't think we should use terms like immoral. I think we all have respect for each other around this table, especially someone who has served his community for 30 years. And I think we just need to lower the volume on this debate a little bit. He's thrown his heart into serving Mississauga, serving Peel Region. I think out of fairness, we don't need commentary like that. And just for clarification on how this all originated, I heard claims out of Mississauga about financial analysis and numbers of what was owed to Mississauga and what Mississauga had been contributing. So I asked my staff at the City of Brampton to look everywhere they can to find what financial analysis backs that up. We asked our own staff to find anything that's been done. We asked the Region Appeal of what financial analysis had been done. And frankly, any member around this table could have done the same thing. And so if there actually was a financial analysis done, and I asked about it and was told it didn't exist, then I'd be upset with the chair. I just want the chair to be honest and forthright and transparent. And I think out of an abundance of caution, regional staff put confidential on that report. And that's why that I brought it here to say, I don't want any of these numbers to be confidential. Frankly, I think out of fairness, I know Mississauga had a town hall, out of fairness to Mississauga, their residents should know what the cost is. If we're saying Mississauga doesn't owe anything and they find out afterwards that there's a big bill, boy, you know, you talk about misinformation, they'd be pretty upset.
Point of order.
I think you have these numbers.
Point of order. There is no
Madam
legal
Mayor.
obligation, Mayor Brown. There is none. We've looked into the legality of that.
So more reason to support this motion to verify that. If an assumption is being made and you feel confident that's not going to be the case, then why not welcome this motion and say, we want the numbers out there. We're okay with transparency. Because when we're hearing one thing from regional staff and Caledon's getting a similar opinion and Brampton's getting a certain opinion, everyone is saying as the same words of caution, and there's one voice expressing another opinion. I think we need to settle this. It doesn't benefit any of us to be dealing with separate numbers. And I really felt when the Deloitte report became public that we'd understand that Deloitte is an internationally recognized, reputable firm, that they've got no partisan stake in this discussion. But it appears that it's now being suggested by some that Deloitte somehow was biased. Now, I think that's a bit of a stretch. Having said that, the reason I put this motion forward is it said in consultation with the 3 municipal clerks. If we agree on the terms of reference, if we agree on the cost we're looking at, then I hope finally we can all have one set of numbers. If the Deloitte wasn't good enough, well, we'll do this again, peer review, whatever it needs to be, to make sure we have one set of numbers. And that's only fair to Caledon residents, it's only fair to Brampton residents, it's only fair to Mississauga residents to know what they're getting into. No one wants to agree to something and then find out afterwards that's going to cost you more. And let's remember the rhetoric that's coming out of Queen's Park. Out of Queen's Park, the one thing that comes up again and again and again by the new government, whether you like them or not, they say their driving interest is the taxpayer. And they want to make a recommendation on regional governance that respects the taxpayer. And if we present to the province before the deadline that comes, our information on each scenario as it affects the taxpayer, that's going to be a pretty persuasive argument. If the stats clearly show, if the evidence clearly shows one scenario is going to cost the taxpayer more in Mississauga, in Brampton, in Caledon, well, that's powerful. Why would we not want that information? And at least this time, hopefully, we can have the terms of reference and the analysis that all three municipalities agree on. I also wanted to mention that I know the different municipalities have looked at the legal analysis of this in terms of what could be owed. And so, frankly, this information's important for that, because if there's a legal opinion being given to one municipality that's based on flawed numbers, that affects that aspect of it as well, too. And so I couldn't imagine why anyone would not support this request to have information public, and I appreciate that Councillor Vicente seconded it. And I should say, in terms of the chair, I never actually met the chair prior to coming to the Region Appeal. And my apprehension was that he wouldn't be a neutral referee of this process. I wasn't his nominator, and I was told at the time by the mayor of Mississauga, you're going to find he's going to be fair and equitable and a referee. And I think that's what you're doing. You're being fair. And as someone who's been a lifelong public servant in Mississauga, I expect you now in this position to look out for the best interest of the region, to be fair, to be equitable to all three municipalities, even though you're a resident of Mississauga. And that's what my impression is you're doing. If you kept something from a mayor or any member of this council, I don't think you'd be doing your job. Being transparent and honest is what we expect of you, and I thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm going to support this motion. Thank you, Mayor Brown, for bringing this forward. I think it's important when we talk about, I know a lot of numbers have been out there, and especially when there's a drive everywhere that governments are trying to push forward an agenda of open data, and also for the media, also for our residents. Ultimately, and I think Mayor Brown touched on that, at the core of this decision, or the core of what we do, is what is the value for the taxpayer. And the taxpayer, regarding the governance models, we've spent, since I've been elected, talking about the recognition the Region Appeal always gets nationwide for their governance, for the administration, for the way that we are effective and financially efficient. And certainly, when we talk about having an official position, I'm more than happy to have that official discussion today and put forth an official position. I'm almost tempted as an amendment to this motion, put wording is in recognition of regional council support for a regional governance two-tier model, and putting that as an amendment. Because certainly I'm proud of the way the region runs. And certainly I think this financial analysis, because there's constant claims of numbers and data, I certainly expect that this type of financial analysis, in consultation with the three municipalities, which will put forth what they think are relevant numbers, will get more of a neutral report, a report that provides more clarity on exactly what are the real costs to the taxpayer. And that should be at the heart of this decision, and I think right now this speaks volumes if we really want to be transparent with our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Innes.
Thank you, Chair. I see this being no different than in 2003 and 2004. While I didn't sit at this table, I sat in the table up at the back. And I recall the province specifically asking Chair Kolb at the time and our staff to provide the numbers. It was part of the consultation, it was part of the review, and Justice Adams went through that thoroughly. And so I see you doing nothing no different than what's already been done, and the precedent has already been set in 2003 and 2004. And further, just adding to it in this motion, it just makes it even all the more transparent, which I think all of us want. We want accountability and transparency. That's what our taxpayers are asked for. So I support this motion. The only thing that I would suggest is that there is an amendment that would include a timeline. I think that this needs to come back, preferably before, obviously, the consultation ends, but I think that we all need it to have our consultation with our area municipalities. Caledon hasn't had our opportunity to sit down as a council and with our community, and they deserve those numbers, not just around this table, but they deserve it as well. And I wouldn't want to hold a public meeting or have a conversation without my residents not having those numbers. So if we can amend this to include a timeline, that would be sufficient. I don't know how much time staff feel that they would need, and I guess that's a question that I would ask to staff, because there is going to have to be some consultation with the 3 municipalities to ensure that we have all the correct numbers.
I take that as a friendly amendment, and I think the consultation deadline, the province wants submissions by mid-May, so that might be appropriate.
Thank you. If I may, though, I think you raise a very important point. I'm trying to understand from the process point of view, if this motion were to find favor, I'm not sure it would be a simple exercise to achieve what it's trying to do, because some of the divisions you have here may manifest themselves at that level. So the clerks, in whatever direction they would be getting from their town councils, might make this a difficult exercise. I know what the timing is as well, so I don't know how quickly you hope to achieve it. So if the next speakers, and perhaps if the mover, and I see guidance from the mayors, if you could give us some comfort as to the practical application, because I think this could be difficult to achieve, perhaps. I just want to raise that concern, and perhaps others can speak to that as well. Councillor Paleshi.
Call the question.
No.
Yeah, I've had a call to call the question. I have to take
Point of privilege, please.
Point of privilege, Madam Mayor.
I'd like to call a 10-minute recess, please.
Yes, and in truth, I think that's a very good idea. Can I have everyone to agree that we can recess for 10 minutes through the call of the chair?
Thank you.
I take that as carried. Thank you all.
If I may, I called the question. I don't see the point in having a recess, coming back, and then just, so I would support the vote on calling the question. If that fails, support Councillor Crombie's 10-minute recess.
And Councillor Paleshi, under our rules, the recess call comes first. And that's
just to come back to call the question?
We carry on from that point, and I will acknowledge you after the recess. But this is the appropriate way a recess would take precedence over. I've made my ruling. I've called a 10-minute recess. Okay, everyone, welcome back. As a point of order and as a point of procedure, Councillor Paleshi still has the floor, and he has made his motion. The only comment I would make to you, Councillor Paleshi, and this is why I was grateful for the recess, apart from taking a breather, I also had the opportunity to talk with staff about the practical application and process in terms of that motion were to go forward, and we had a bit of a discussion around that. Councillor Paleshi, I don't know if the mover, the seconder, or the other councillors want to hear what that might be, but I've made that point. I come back to you where we were. You had a motion on the floor. What is your motion before the floor?
Mr. Chair, I respect you as the chair of the Region Appeal, and I withdraw calling the question.
I appreciate that. My next speaker is Councillor Sato.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am supporting the motion, and I had spoken with the Mayor of Brampton earlier about his motion, and my residents are asking for a review of particularly of the Deloitte report, because there are assumptions in that report that concern the residents. And I think in order to be totally, I hate these words, open and transparent, but I think in order to do our homework fully, we do need to have an independent review of that report and the Mississauga numbers and any numbers that Brampton and Caledon have. I think that is the only way that we should be open with our residents. So I support your motion, Mayor Brown, to do an independent review. I would like to suggest that it not be the clerks of the municipalities. I think it should be the CAOs of the municipalities. And I think we need to be very clear of what the terms of reference would be, because just to send out a motion to do a review, or could you put the motion back up? Sorry, I was trying to remember. Mayor Brown's motion. It's
Yes, that'd be appropriate. If we can
yeah,
have
I
the-
just
the
want, I want to
appropriate
refer to the
motion
wording
before
in
us.
it,
Yes.
and I don't recall what it is. But I think the terms of reference, we need to look at all of the numbers, and if it can't, thank you. I think we should be doing the financial analysis of the cost of all of the options, not just the dissolution of the region of Peel. I think by only analyzing one option, I don't think we are doing a fair analysis, and there is information in each of those sections of the Deloitte report that I think are important for us to analyze and review. And the information, I think what you have here is basically a terms of reference, some terms of reference, but not all terms of reference. So you have the analysis include an estimate of what would be owed to each municipality. That should probably read what, if anything, should be owed. But you also need an analysis of the existing financial position as to what each municipality is paying into the region and what funds are being expended on each municipality. And I'm not sure that I agree that we should be trying to get it to the end of the consultation period, which is the end of May. I think and I'm almost and I don't know if you could get agreement on this, because this is a governance issue, and perhaps we should be saying that the three mayors also be involved in setting those terms of reference with the CAOs. And I know if you got a choice, you could do it within a few days, call a special regional council meeting for council to approve it, or you could, if the mayors are in agreement, and there'd have to be consensus here, that it could be sent out to each of the municipalities. We need to direct our staff to be involved in this. So I would assume we would end up probably next week calling a special council meeting to do that, because they can't get involved in such a study without council direction. So I think the idea is a good idea. I think we should move ahead with it, but I do think there needs to be some amendments made here. First of all, I don't think the three municipal clerks are the ones that should be involved. So it should be either the CFO or the CAO. So I think if we put the CAO, they can deal with it there. But so Mayor Brown, if you would agree to some of the amendments to the motion, I am fully in support of your motion. I think it's appropriate, and I hate spending money. I hate spending more money. But our residents are asking for the information, and I think it's incumbent upon us to give it to them.
Okay. If I could, Chair, respond to that.
you've been named. Go ahead.
I would take those suggestions as a friendly amendment in terms of the CEO rather than the clerks. And then additionally, analyzing the three different options. And I would just thank Councillor Sado for this request. I think it's only fair to all the residents that they have all the information, and so thank you for making that request. I'm not sure the portion about the mayors. The mayors can speak to the CEOs. I don't think, we don't want to make this political, keep it on a bureaucratic level.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Sado, on a point of clarity, because I was doing the same thing those 10 minutes just to understand process. I'm not saying it does or doesn't raise a concern, but the clerk might like to speak to the difference between a clerk, a CAO, etc. So the clerk or because that point came up as to why.
And I got a suggestion from the clerk on the challenge around timing with an amendment that would achieve both things. So can we put that amendment on the screen to answer the concern on timing?
Okay, and we will come back, because I think we have to nail down a time that it's got to come back. But through to the clerk, any issue with it being other than a clerk, or no problem with it being the CAOs, because that did come up as a bit of a discussion.
No, I don't think that there's any problem with it being CAOs instead of the clerks. I think that the clerks was originally proposed because of the no delegated authority to the clerks, and there is to the CAOs.
Very good.
But that's okay, given the conversation that's going on right now.
Very good. Councillor Sato, thank you very much. Did you have anything for you? Still have the floor if you had.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I do not think that Deloitte should be doing this review because they can't review their own review. So I would not agree with, I have no problem with Deloitte attending the next regional council meeting or anyone sending questions to Deloitte. But I'm looking for an independent review, and you can't have a consultant review their consultant report. So I'm not sure who we have. Staff could probably advise who we might be able to bring in. I know we've used other consulting firms in the past, but having Deloitte, I think, would be a very bad idea because, of course, all they're going to do is repeat their report. So I think that would, quite frankly, be a waste of money.
Thank you. I appreciate your point of view, but before we're done here, and I would want to nail down that resolution definitively, because these are the actual issues that are going to scupper us otherwise.
Sorry, just to clarify, that aspect would be viewed as a friendly amendment too. In the interim, we use Deloitte to answer any questions next week. I don't want anyone to question the numbers. I want everyone to agree on whoever that third party is, and so the clerks pick someone. There's other groups like KPMG. I'm sure you could find someone. Friendly amendment.
We will double back on that when I hear from the rest of the speakers. Councillor Parrish.
I would like to defer to the mayor because we caucused and we came up with amendments that we all agreed to, and they were drafted appropriately. She has the draft, so I'm deferring to her. I will support the amended motion as well, and I will support a change of Deloitte after next week. But this is all in Mayor Crombie's speaking points.
Thank you, and the mayor is next. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish and Councillor Sato. I appreciate what you've done, but we had just caucus and just discussed that. So I'm speaking on behalf of our Mississauga caucus, and we all agree in the interest of greater transparency and accountability, we would like to support the analysis. I would also like to second the report, if you don't mind, Councillor Vincente. That way it looks like it has broader support, not just a Brampton motion, but a broader motion that we all support, if you don't mind, if that's okay with Council. Thank you, Councillor Vincente. Terrific. So that the CAO, so the friendly amendments, Mayor Brown, please, that the CAOs of each member of the municipality set the terms of reference. 2, that all options are evaluated equally, and that the assumption that the region continues to exist not be the starting point. 3, that the analysis include how much each municipality is currently contributing to the region. And 4, that an independent audit firm be used to conduct this research other than Deloitte. And 5th, that the report come back to us by May 31st.
Very good, and we're going to write those out. Perhaps I have to, well, Mayor Brown is next on the list. I was going to ask if he would accept them as friendly, but he can speak to it accordingly. Mayor Brown.
So I would accept that as friendly, but just to be clear, it's looking at the contribution on an annual basis and in the totality. So it would be giving us an assessment of what's paid each year, but also what has been paid historically, if anything was due. It's not simply 1 year. Yeah.
That's fine with us.
Very good. Anything further, Mayor Brown?
No, I just look forward to seeing how this is.
Yeah, and we're going to nail it down in the words without question. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Crombie. Mayor Thompson.
No, sorry.
Very good. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. See, we can work together. Kidding. I just wanted to say that I support the motion. I think this is, as much as Councillor Sato has mentioned it, we don't want to spend, put good money after bad, or whatever the phrase is, I can't recall. But the fact is, I'm looking for more information. I know we're under short timelines. My residents are looking for information, and if we can, this will be a prudent spend if we can get the information that will at least take us to the next step to make an informed decision as possible under the circumstances. So I would support the original motion and the changes as proposed by Mayor Crombie. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too support the changes that the mayor has put on there. But I just wondered if the CFO should be also involved with the CAOs as well, because we're talking about finances, and I think they have a good handle on each of their municipalities' finances. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Perhaps our CAO first?
Okay. Through the chair, I think by putting in the 3 CAOs that we would have the authority to kind of pull in who we think the most appropriate staff are. The other thing I would just throw out, I've heard not to use Deloitte because they did the first. I wonder if we want to put a bit of a box around it, would we use to try to narrow down who would we bring in to do it, that it wouldn't be the auditor of any 4 of the 4 municipalities, that it's independent to all 4?
Yes, yes. Yep.
If there is one.
And just on my final point, I know we're asking for what each municipality contributes, but we might want to look at what each municipality, what we spend, which each municipality we spend and they use. Because I think in the Justice Adams report, if I remember correctly, that was part of that as well, so.
Thank you. Councillor Sinclair.
Yes, thank you. Speaking to the issue of timing, mentioned in the motion, the end of consultation period. In the event we don't get it all done perfectly by that time, I don't see why we couldn't inform the province and say, look, we've got this coming to you. It's work outstanding that we intended to contribute. So we need some flexibility there. Thank you.
Agreed, and I think I may be able to convey that sentiment on our behalf, and I think they would welcome that because they've been pretty reasonable in terms of understanding our imperatives as well. My list continues. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask the same question as Councillor Sinclair. Do you think it's necessary within the motion to inform the province of what we're undertaking?
I'm going to take that as direction through the chair. They have a good idea, but I will formalize it in correspondence. Here's a resolution.
Just in case we go past.
The chair will take that as direction.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess just as a follow-up, so for example, when we're going off putting this study together, and when Deloitte prepared the study, I would imagine they're using same criteria, looking at same efficiencies that the province would use for their evaluation. So I'm not sure how would we get, so I'd want to get a study that would sort of mirror what the province is going to be considering when determining their decision. So I don't know how we go about doing that.
Yeah, and that in some parts has been spelled out for us, but the CAO can speak to that as well.
Through the chair, certainly with Deloitte, they were given what the mandate is of the advisors and what they're looking for as part of the regional review to inform, and we would do the same thing with the other body that would be coming in.
Very good. That exhausts my list, and we're just waiting to finalize the motion because I most assuredly want it before me in writing, and I want you all to see it and be clear on it before we call the vote. All right, you can see it before you, but I think something of this importance the chair will formally read. Duly moved by Mayor Brown, seconded by Mayor Crombie, that the Region of Peel, in consultation with the 3 chief financial officers, it says 3 here, but it does say 4 there. So to be clear, the 4 chief administrative officers set the terms of reference, do a financial analysis of the 3 options related to the future of the Region of Peel, and further that all options are evaluated equally, and further that the analysis include how much each municipality is currently contributing annually and in totality to the Region of Peel, and further that an independent audit firm be used to conduct this research other than Deloitte, and further that the analysis include an estimate of what would potentially be owed to each municipality upon dissolution, and further that the analysis be completed prior to the end of the consultation period, and further that in the interim, the regional clerk requests that Deloitte attend the next regional council meeting, and further that any requests from any municipality for Deloitte be forwarded to the clerk by Thursday, April 18, 2019, and they will be provided to Deloitte in advance, and further that the cost for Deloitte be authorized, and further that the cost of the analysis be authorized. I have speakers to the motion. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. It says that the cost for Deloitte be authorized?
Them to come back here.
Prepare a presentation.
To why?
Next week, we want to ask questions, he said.
Okay. Further up, you may want to check with your legal department, but we already have a legal ruling that there is no cost going back to any municipality in the case of a potentially owed to each municipality and upon a dissolution. Our legal team says that is, no, it's not accurate. According to Mary Ellen Bench, it's not the case.
And I'm thinking that's the purpose of the report, to arrive at that conclusion.
No, it's a financial analysis. We're talking about a legal issue.
And I think they'd have to resolve that legal issue as well. Yeah.
Well, then, okay, you put the word potentially in.
Okay. Madam Mayor? Thank you. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just for clarification, the term or the point that says "and in totality" to the Region of Peel, that is totality taking into account the historic contribution in the past of every municipality in the region. Okay, just wanted to confirm.
Yes, that is how it is.
Thank you.
Seeing no other speakers, I would trust we would ask for a recorded vote if someone would. So that has been asked for through Councillor Medeiros and Mayor. It's all recorded. Oh, now that we're down to this point, you're right. You're absolutely right. So with that, it is time to vote. You have the motion before you.
See, the region works.
Yes. And that carries unanimously, with thanks to all. A tough conversation, but I think a conversation that needed to be had. So thanks to all on that. Moving along, I come down to notices of motion. Councillor Parish has removed her 20.1. The bylaws, Madam Clerk. That the bylaw listed on the April 11, 2019 Regional Council agenda being bylaw 2019 be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. That is moved by Councillor Sinclair and Councillor Santos. All those in favor, recorded vote again, Madam Clerk, just a show of hands. All those in favor by way of show of hands, that carries. Thank you. Our next resolution, that the bylaw 29-2019 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on April 11, 2019, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region of Peel bylaws relating thereto be given, and the required number of readings taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. That has been moved by Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown. All those in favor? That is carried. That the April 11, 2019 council meeting be adjourned as moved by Councillor Mahoney and seconded by Councillor Kovac. All those in favor? That is carried with thanks to all and to staff and all those in attendance.